Hello and welcome to another Daily Muppet. I have quite a bit to talk about today. I want to talk about the overall philosophy behind the, what's going on with INEOS moving forward, with some specifics. Talk about some of the transfer news on center backs. Talk about a few things on the manager front, and Bruno, Rashford, and quite a bit more. So let's get into it. Okay, so yeah, we'll get a new intro soon, but I thought that one was still fun. No complaints there. Fun and short. So, mainly what I wanted to speak about to start, that will kind of tie into everything that moves forward, is that there's a the view of INEOS. I've shared this before, and of the people involved, and I'm not just talking about INEOS, but the people that they're hiring, Jason Wilcox, etc. In looking at the club, is that realistically it's going to take 3 years to be back at a level where they can compete. 3 years to turn over the squad, to rebuild it enough to where they can be back at a level where they can compete for the major trophies on a consistent basis. That doesn't mean, crap for 3 years and then suddenly you're competing for titles. But, like Jim Ratcliffe put it, a nice upward trajectory towards there. But that's the timeline that they believe it really is going to take. Very often, I think, as fans and the club itself has fooled itself into thinking we're almost there. Under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, when we finished second in that Europa League final year, saying, let's sign Ronaldo because we're almost there. And it backfired explosively and did not work at all. Even with adding Varane, Ronaldo, and Sancho, which you would think would have been an incredible window that could have spurred any team to the level of competing for titles after finishing second, but not so. And that's because we were not really almost there. And sometimes the things that you do that get you feeling like you're almost there are not things you can continue to do to get you all the way there. And we've seen that time and time again. And so I feel like it's important to understand that for all of us as fans and for everybody involved, that this is a 3-year plan. And I'm not saying we shouldn't expect to be good, or we shouldn't expect to see progress, or we should accept mediocrity. But people really have to realize and take a look at it and say, if we want to do things right for the first time ever, there's going to be growing pains. And that ties into, a few types of things. Number one factor, I just briefly want to touch on this on the manager side of things, is that, you take Thomas Tuchel, right? What I've been told about that has been a bit different. I've been kind of quiet on Tuchel. There's been a lot of noise on it. As I gathered it, he would love the United job in theory, but in reality, in terms of what's on the table, what United are looking for someone to build this team, it's not necessarily a job that, in the way that it's laid out, in the way that it's structured, in the way that it's put forward, that he would be entirely enamored with doing. It's not necessarily that. And so I don't think he is totally convinced of it. And when you look at the stories today of him potentially staying at Bayern after they essentially rejected him and told him he's going to leave after they've missed out on other managers and it being considered, that's a factor. He would not be totally convinced of the United job if it was on offer, based on my understanding of any sort of contacts that have occurred. So, it's not what is the reality of the situation is not necessarily going to be that interesting to every potential manager out there. Pep Guardiola wouldn't probably take the job if he was out of a job where maybe he would because of Barada and Wilcox, but there's a reality of what the job entails, the changing of the role, the changing of the setup, the changing of the situation, and the understanding that there's an overhaul. And that there might be a lot of departures and a lot of change coming over the next few years. And that's not necessarily going to be for everybody, and that is a factor into the whole aspects of the manager situation, because you have to have somebody who's willing to do that. First and foremost, that is the number one factor, somebody willing to do that. And then who's the best person to do it, be it Ten Hag or otherwise. But that is an issue with Thomas Tuchel and him being an option. And so I'm not surprised by the stories today about him potentially staying at Bayern. Obviously, all this kind of stuff is a live discussion with, let's see, a live discussion with things that are going on across the board. With that in mind, I want to give a very specific piece of information. On Tuesday, there was an executive meeting in Monaco and Nice with the United leadership, and that includes people from United and INEOS Sport, Colette Roche, Jason Wilcox, Jean-Claude Blanc, who is now acting as CEO in the interim until Omar Barada arrives, Roger Bell, who is the new CFO and is in the role as of this time, and Sir Jim, and Dave Brailsford. I don't think I mentioned Dave Brailsford. So yeah, Colette Roche, Jason Wilcox, Dave Brailsford, Jean-Claude Blanc, Roger Bell, and Sir Jim. And they've had some of these kind of summits before, I guess you might call it. This isn't the first time, but it's not an everyday occurrence. And as I gather it, as I understood it from what was given to me, this is definitely the sort of maybe kind of a big one. Not special in a respect, but this is where the decisions are, getting made. And as I gathered it, things that were kind of laying down those kind of more concrete plans for the upcoming summer, which is approaching rapidly, right? For specifically the transfer business to get going, for the manager situation, for budgets, for who's going to go, and a lot more. And this is going to be based on, a lot of the data that they've been gathering, Dave Brailsford having been there a long time, the financials, which, Roger Bell as CFO would be on top of, as well as Jean-Claude Blanc now as CEO, as well as Jason Wilcox's now assessment of things, including discussions with players, which I'll get to for a minute. So they're going to be really deciding, very likely, these are all the players that, we're definitely going to be shopping. These are the ones we're going to be holding on to. These are the ones who are, if we get a big offer, but we're not going to be soliciting offers. These are the specific players we're going to buy. These are the scenarios. These are the money. These are the kinds of plans that have to be totally finalized. And I believe this meeting was really concretely putting a lot of that forward so that they can really start to work in earnest. And as well as I understand it, that there's definitely, things being set up with players of, agents and things like that to start transfer business in earnest. And I don't get the impression that they're going to be waiting around till July to get moving on these things. As I can gather, they're definitely working on things very, very fast and ready to get going and kick everything off really right as the season ends and get into it. And so that is a very good thing. And and so that's a good thing. This is only good news. They're not sitting idly by and waiting, but this is good, and I expect then we'll be able to see things accelerate from here. And again, as I said, yes, I think initially I was confused about this, but I was able to clarify that Jean-Claude Blanc and Roger Bell are now active in their positions at the club. As of right now, they're acting CEO and CFO at the club. So that's all very good. Now, in terms of discussions with players, there's been a lot of meetings with them. And there's players that have had concerns. Where are we going? Some of the wording's out there, some of the stories out there. Everybody's for sale, this, that, the other, right? A lot of kind of, when you get a transition like this, there's certainly a lot of chaos that kind of comes into it as well. It's not always, clean. And there's a lot of questions about, what is exactly happening? What is exactly, am I safe? Where are things going? And I'll talk about Bruno and Rashford in a minute. But specifically, the way that INEOS looked at it is, kind of their view from my understanding of the leadership view. I should stop saying INEOS now because this all involves Jason Wilcox, right? Who's appointed there and Blanc is the CEO, and but people who obviously influenced by INEOS sport. That they are kind of leading the leading forward now and bringing everything forward now at this point in time, and and with that comes a certain idea. And what they really want from players is they want to know who really wants to stay and fight and earn their place in the team and contribute to this project, right? To contribute to this real rebuild and this thing that is going to take a certain amount of time, right? It's not an overnight thing. It is something that's going to take time, and and so that is a kind of a big factor in this, in the discussions that they've had, which they've had with many players now about who they're going to be talking to, who they're going to be keeping, who's going to be leaving, all of that. Those are discussions they've had with a lot of people now. And so I think that is a huge factor in the decisions, and they wanted to hold a lot of those meetings and discussions prior to formalizing these plans, because it does matter. If players want to stay, if players are real on being a part of the overall contribution and plan moving forward, that matters. One of the things that a lot of players wanted in particular, I think, where they had concerns moving forward, is what specifically would be their role in the team moving forward. Because a lot of players who've been here for many years have had a lot of confusion about what is their role in the team. And, where do they fit, and where is it 1 year to the next year, and chopping and changing. The same way we as fans look at it and say, how does this work? We, like Sir Jim said, oscillating from Jose Mourinho to Pep Guardiola, like we've done with managers. Well, how does that affect the players? It's easy to sit there and say, well, XYZ's been here to 2 or 3 managers, so they're the problem. Well, yeah, except they were asked to do one thing under this manager, one thing under this manager, one thing under this manager. There's no continuity in roles, and you actually get more continuity at smaller clubs, because generally, Burnley played the same way for like 10 years, right? And so anybody there is going to know exactly what they're going to do. Anybody who comes into that team knows exactly what they're going to do year on year on year. And it's a little more chaotic at top clubs, where you're always trying to play a more dominating style, rather than the way that a lot of mid-table and lower clubs have played in the past. So that was one of the things a lot of players really wanted to clarify and understand. There's players who certainly, based on this discussions about wanting to stay and their roles and all of that, are definitely, available. We know that obviously Rafael Varane is leaving, and that they didn't want to give him a contract. That Tony Martial is leaving. We know that, Sancho would like to leave. Greenwood would like to leave. Now, could they have another discussion with Sancho after the season? Absolutely, they could, to see if anything could change at all, in that. So, there's things that could adjust a little bit there with players who are not present, but they've had some talks with him already, as I think Ten Hag put out there. Other players, certainly they've really opened it up to say these players are available. And some of the ones that are more interested in leaving are, for example, Wan-Bissaka. Now, the story last night about him, the goodbyes, and he's already gone, it's not correct. His contract is active for 1 more season. It was triggered in January. There's no deal for him to leave right this second. However, as I believe, he is somebody who has expressed a desire to return to London, and maybe that there's something that could be looked at there in terms of a deal with Crystal Palace, given the interest in Michael Olise. So that's one I would definitely keep an eye on. Antony is somebody that I believe that they would like to let go. Casemiro, obviously they're open. And some Casemiro is one who has major concern over these roles. I don't know if he's actually, to be fair on him, I don't know if he's actually fallen off quite as much as it appears, but I do think he's kind of given up a little bit and looking at it and saying, it's an impossible task. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm being shifted around all year. It gets really difficult for players to do that, and that's probably not why he signed for Manchester United. And so I think that those are some of the things that they have to that are under consideration and have come up. Some of the players where they're wondering, what is my role in this team? Eriksson as well does not feel like he has a role, is not convinced on wanting to stay, and I think he's someone I would look at potentially being made available for free to move away. Scott McTominay is someone who's going to want his role clarified a bit more in terms of a decision about whether he stays or goes. Where you have players who are like, obviously, Højlund, Garnacho, Kobbie Mainoo, who are going to be focal points of the team. I'll get to center backs and then I'll discuss Bruno and Rashford, because those are two big names, the two biggest ones, I think, where you're kind of wondering, how do they fit into that? And there's obviously a story from Ornstein, but I want to talk about that in more detail. On center backs, you saw a story came out about Gerard Braithwaite, kind of confirming the information I've been discussing in some recent videos, that they're looking to, potentially make an offer for Braithwaite. The number mentioned was 55 million. I feel as though that would be kind of at the top end of what's being offered, maybe even in a structured deal, to take advantage of as well Everton's financial situation. And United's kind of strategies hold their feet to the fire. They need money this fiscal year, I believe, and potentially look at making a deal before July 1st. But the closer to it, the more pressure on them, and that could, cause them to accept something more reasonable. Because like I said before, United will not pay 70, 80 million or anything like that quoted, and I don't think it's reasonable for them to ask. Todibo continues to be an option. Tosin, as we've seen, may be going to Newcastle. They've made a big offer. United, as I understand, have not made any contact in terms of specific talks over a deal for him yet. They haven't. They hadn't the last time I talked, and I've not heard anything to change that. A good offer from Newcastle, but of course there's still time, to see if they decide to make a move there. The interesting one, there's a story on Euro, who I think is probably the top-rated young center back in all of Europe right now. Who, for a long time it looked like he was destined for Madrid. Now, why they've decided maybe not to go for him, I don't know. But there's a few stories saying suddenly that he's no longer someone that they're going to sign this summer. Do I believe it? I'm not 100%, because Madrid have done that before and then they end up signing him. United have absolutely watched him. They've absolutely looked at him in the past, and high up as most top teams. And so, he's somebody that is potentially not even that expensive. I think he's a year left on his contract. Definitely one I would keep an eye on. If he doesn't go to Madrid, I would expect there would be no reason that United shouldn't be involved in that. In that. One more thing, not a center back, but on this, there's obviously been as well a lot of talk of Vitor Roque. United have been interested in him in the past. He looks like he's leaving Barcelona. I think that's an intriguing name as a young striker who can develop, who can play. Maybe there's a deal to be made with Barcelona. I know they've said they're not interested in Mason Greenwood. I don't know. But maybe there's a deal that could be made there. That's a decent option that United have had interest in the past before he signed for Barcelona over that striker. And I think it would be a good depth option, someone to rotate in and also to develop, a young player. So that's one I would keep an eye on as well. Let's talk about Bruno and Rashford. So first on Bruno, he had concerns. He's had concerns. I've mentioned before for a long time that there's a potential that he could be sold. Now, if you read the full Ornstein story that came out, after there's a bunch of stories about, offers from Saudi and things, and they're still going, right? Ornstein didn't say he couldn't leave. What he said was that he had these concerns and he wanted to clarify it, and him and his people met with INEOS, similar to this, and they want to know, you want to stay. He wants to know they're going to match the ambitions of what he has and wants to do. But it still says he could decide to go if he feels like they haven't met that, or they could sell him if a huge offer came in. And so it's not one to just completely write off. I'm not saying, I don't believe he's kind of in that middle ground, not somebody they're actively trying to sell, for sure. I think they'd be happy to keep Bruno and have him as a focal point that they can build with. But if he's not totally 100% in for this longer plan being laid out, and a big offer comes in and he wants to take it, he will go. That is not out of the question. That that's not out of the question, and that's really where that is. And he is somebody who very much, I think, has been as well wanting to really clarify his role moving forward and exactly what he's going to do and how he's going to play and how he's going to be supported. You can see, I feel that Bruno this year feels a bit beaten down, missing injury for the first few times, though I think he's back today. I don't know. Players are arriving as I'm recording this, and I didn't see. But obviously Lisandro Martinez, which is awesome, who will likely be a sub. So, I think he feels a bit beaten down. It was a rough season. Then he had really good form for a bit there, kind of carrying us through to get some goals. And then I think he has his injury and he's struggled and he's been playing through a lot. And I think he really wants to see things moving forward. And Rashford is the other one in the same boat. He doesn't want to leave. He's had discussions with INEOS, and for him, again, one of the biggest things is clarifying that role in the team specifically. Because, people talk about these yo-yo seasons of Rashford, but they do not recognize when they're looking at that, the change in roles that are often maybe not as obvious, because people say, well, he plays on the left wing, but it's not the case. His role this season is totally different to his role last season, where last season he was the main outlet with the lack of a main outlet striker. Different role to this season being wider on the touch, and that was specifically communicated to him to have a different role this season. And he struggled with it, no doubt about it, and his form hasn't been great, and he's got his own things, but it's gone like that kind of back and forth over his career at United, where under Jose it's this, under Oli it's this, under this it's this, and it goes back and forth, and they sign a player and it changes and it moves, and that continuity, it's hard to be consistent without that continuity in the setup for anybody. And you see it more with players like Rashford, who've been here a long time, that they suffer from it because they're doing ups and downs, same as the team are. They're riding the same wave as the team. It's impossible to maintain a level of consistency when everything is changing underneath you. And so he wants to see that consistency and that plan moving forward. And I think he's somebody who would want more responsibility as on the pitch, as a footballer, in the team, and to really have that and really lead in terms of on the pitch, in a way that could be done. And so I think that he's somebody in a similar vein to Bruno. I think they're two very similar players in this respect, where they are at right now in terms of their mentality and what they see. They would love to do it. They would love to lead the team forward and to be a part of it, but they really do want to see ambition and those goals matched and continuity and all of that, so that there's real progress being made. And a big part of that is not breaking promises. Phil talked about this, I think, in the last thing and mentioned something elsewhere, but broken promises to players from the past thing, saying, look, yeah, we're going to sign Kane. Well, what happens if you sign Kane to Rashford's role? Kane being a, drop-in, more center forward. You keep having Rashford as that out ball, playing more like Heung-min Son played with Harry Kane, a good partnership, somewhere where he would thrive as more of an inside striker who can go beyond the number 9. It's different with Rasmus Højlund, and so the role changes, the game changes. He starts the season as striker. But you can't break these promises, and that's what so many players have felt like. Pogba, so many others in the past have felt like promises broken. And that's the thing that they're going to want to see, and INEOS can't mess this up now. They have to keep these, what they're saying to these players in these meetings about ambition and all of that, they have to keep it. They have to keep it, they have to follow it, and they cannot mess it up. And so... that's the thing. Otherwise, they will lose people. And it's not so much that they can't, it's not as easy as people think to replace players like Bruno and Rashford for the money you're going to get, or may not get, because you still need a big offer. But if you lose them because you're failing to reach the ambitious heights that you have, it has an effect on your recruitment. When you start losing top players left and right, people who are well admired by other footballers and agents and things, where why would we want to join your club when we see what's happening? And there's a lot of optimism in what INEOS can bring to the table in terms of change. They have to follow that up, and I think they will. So yeah, that's what I have for today. That's what I wanted to share ahead of this. I hope it was an interesting video. They're ready to get going. I mean, and now I would say the real business is about to start on all fronts. So obviously, with that, it being nearly summer and the season nearly over, again, things get crazy, things get busy, it gets chaotic. I can't believe it's like sixth summer doing this as a Muppeteers. It's come a long way. So I wanted to thank everybody who supported us in the community, watches the videos, the Patreon. I don't really talk about it much because I'm not trying to advertise and sell things. But that's obviously been a way people have supported, and there's Discord channels and things like that for that. So I want to just thank everybody and look forward to hopefully a very exciting summer to come that is really needed after the FA Cup final, and hopefully we can get a win there too to lead into it. As unlikely as it is, it would be a good start to things. So thank you for watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications on, and I'll see you in the next one.